Hello, welcome to this very special edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at Tavern on Jane here in New York City. Tonight, celebrating his birthday here at Tavern on Jane is legendary vocalist and pianist Johnny O'Neill. Now, as you might know, for over 50 years, Mr. O'Neill has been a very, very important fixture on the international jazz scene by fusing both his unique jazz by way of gospel and blues style to his fold. This gentleman has recorded and toured with the likes of Art Blakey, Clark Terry, and Ray Brown, just to name the endless few. Tonight here on the Pace Report here at Tavern on Jane, you're going to see highlights of him performing songs that he loves. We're going to sit down and we're going to deep real hard into his Detroit roots. We're going to reflect on the great Baker's Keyboard Lounge in Detroit, as well as talk about playing with some of the heavyweights from Detroit, including the great Milt Jackson, as well as the great Kenny Burrell. Also, we're going to sit down and talk about how gospel was very, very, very important to him as part of his rudiments and how he started to develop his own style. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of the birthday celebration of Mr. Johnny O'Neill, live here at the Tavern on Jane, here on the Pace Report, here in New York City.
She doesn't know I love her. How could she possibly know? She's a girl I never met till I lit her cigarette a moment or so ago. She doesn't know I need her. How fast could anyone fall? She may think I'm too naive. She might laugh, she might leave. Yeah, to explain it all. Take it slow. Say hello. Don't stare at her fabulous face. Hurry near, linger near, though your heart jumps all over the place. If it should take a lifetime, sure that this feeling will grow. And I make her love me so, she'll never let me go. That's another thing she doesn't know. That's another thing she doesn't know.
Johnny, happy birthday. Unfortunately, we have to meet in circumstances like this, but
No, it's unfortunate, but I'm glad to still be here to share the music and to perform this evening. You know,
Johnny, you 64 years young, and you've brought a whole another life to this music right now, and a lot of people have been seeing you the last couple of weeks. Their spirits have been lifted. The music has done a pretty good job of doing that.
oh yes, it has. You know, playing outside and people come out and support the music has really been gratifying, and I can't think of anything else better to do to continue to keep this American's art form alive and well.
How have you been holding up during this pandemic? How have you been able to keep your spirits up, but also your chops up as far as you playing?
Well, I've been reinventing myself. I've gone back and listened to a lot of music that I've kind of overlooked that I haven't been listening to for the longest, like such example as Nat King Cole, a lot of the great masters. I kind of been reinventing them all over again, and I found a lot of new things that I've never discovered before musically, you know?
You know, you and I have some old stomping grounds, Detroit. In fact, when I talked to you the other night, Detroit is it was where the beginning, where it all started.
Well, actually, my career, jazz-wise, actually started in St. Louis. But of course, you know, I'm from Detroit. But St. Louis is where I got my start. I played, actually, 1975. I played, I was the youngest kid in the band, and I played with the Kenny Gooch Quintet for a year, 6 nights a week, $100 a week in those days. That was a lot of money. That's where I really developed and learned how to play jazz, playing with a lot of the, you know, great musicians from St. Louis.
Detroit is very important because Reverend James Cleveland, he started the Gospel Music Workshop of America there. You got the Clark Sisters, you have the Winans, Fred Hammond Commission. There's a lot of great gospel that came out of Detroit.
Oh yeah, well, you know, those are my roots. Of course, I go back to the gospel, which I started playing first. And we were talking about the other night, James Cleveland. Actually, I won the best gospel pianist 1972 in Kansas City, the Gospel Workshop Convention. The Clark Sisters, we all are very different. We all grew up together in Detroit. You know, I haven't seen them for years. I would love to. Twinkie, we used to get together and just practice together on Saturdays back in the day, you know?
Speaking of Twinkie, the Twinkie really was, she was the glue of the Clark Sisters. I mean,
Glue and her mother, of course, she was very influenced by her mother. I got a chance to know her mother pretty well. We played in church for a church. I can't remember the church it was, but we played a few Sundays together where I played organ and she played piano.
how was,
Direct, boy. She was one of the best directors ever.
I was going to ask you, because Hattie Moss Clark was really, she and James Cleveland kind of changed the direction of contemporary black gospel music.
Well, they most definitely did for that time, yes. And it's still today is just as hip as anything. You know, a lot of the gospel today, I have a lot of respect for it, but a lot of it has lost a lot of its spiritual substance. It's over exaggerated now. It's just lost a lot of its spiritual substance, you know. But I appreciate it, you know. It's something new in it, you know. But I'm the tradition. I can't help it. I come up from the old school, and that's where my roots really are. And I think if young players will go back in time and develop the James Clevelands and the Mattie Moss Clark, you will become more of a complete gospel player. You have to have that foundation.
Another very important part of Detroit, as far as the rudiments of black gospel music, is Reverend C.L. Franklin and the New Bethel Baptist Church.
Well, you know, I played there when I was a kid. This was 1972, I believe it was. I was still in high school. I played there for not quite a year, But you know, during those days, I never, still to this day, had the opportunity to meet Aretha Franklin. And 6 years ago, she was supposed to have honored me in Detroit. I was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, and she got sick and she couldn't do it. So Mulgrew wound up giving me the honoree. But I would have loved to have met Aretha. That was really one of my biggest goals, to meet her, but it never happened. But I was told by many sources that she and I would have been just the best of friends. I would have loved to accompany her. Actually, she was a big influence of my gospel piano playing. You know, she was one of the first ones I heard play. And I was blown away to hear her sound like a whole orchestra with the rhythm and the time and just, and plus her singing as well, you know, she was just the best.
What did you think of Amazing Grace? Amazing Grace is one of the greatest gospel records ever recorded.
Wonderful gospel renditions of. She did two versions. She did one in the early when she was 14, and then she also did another version of it with James Cleveland. You know, both of them are fantastic. You know. I'd like to change the mood a bit here and play a beautiful song by the great Stevie Wonder called "Creeping." I just heard it today, so it made me think of it. Play it tonight. How does that go? Yeah. Oh.
we know that gospel really started the rudiments of your playing, but your father also, I understand, was very important in introducing you to different styles.
Well, you know, actually, I'm a late bloomer in most people's minds. When you think of the piano, most people think you would start at 5 years old. I started actually at 13 from the very beginning. I heard my father play the piano at a house party, and I was so blown away by it. I said, Dad, I want to learn how to play. But he couldn't teach me, so he sent me to a friend of his for lessons. And my dad was really the biggest motivating force for me musically. He was my teacher, thankfully. He used to annoy me at times, but I'm so glad today that he did. He used to make me sit and listen to a lot of the great jazz players and listen to different embellishments and how to accompany and repertoire. And he always used to say, if you want to be a good piano player, learn how to play for a singer, because singers always need piano players. And I give a lot of credit and respect to singers because they enabled me to develop a sound and a touch and develop a repertoire, you know.
You know, Johnny, we lost a very, very important vocalist. In fact, he was kind of like one of the last of the last. And I'm talking about one of your contemporaries, Mr. Freddie Cole.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I met Freddie Cole 20 plus years ago in Atlanta. Was the first time we met. And I remember he came to see me play once, and I acknowledged his presence. But at the time, I didn't know he didn't like being introduced as Nat King Cole's younger brother. And I said it on the microphone. I said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of one of our late and great Nat King Cole's brother, Freddie Cole. After the set, he came up to me. He said, don't you ever introduce me like that. But it's the truth, though. You are his younger brother. I didn't know. So that was our first encounter. But we were, through the years, we've shared the same bill. We've done the jazz cruises. He'll come sit in with me. I couldn't get him off stage most times. He'll come up and sing 4 or 5 songs with me, you know.
And I bring up Freddie because you and Freddie, you guys know close to 2,000 songs. And it's like, how did you retain and learn all of these songs? And then also, like you said, interpreting these songs, playing them on the band stage. How do you know and how do you feel motivated to sing those songs in different ways?
You know, lyrics has always been really, it's the story behind the songs. And people have asked me many years, well, Johnny, how do you learn or how do you know all those tunes? If there's tunes that I like, especially lyrically, if there's a song that I like, what I would do, I would write down the lyrics. I have to write it down in my own handwriting. Once I write them down, then I download it. I got it memorized. If I don't write it down, I can't remember the words. I have to be able to see the words for me to memorize them.
That's how I am when I research artists. I have to write everything down and everything becomes embedded in my memory banks. But you straddle. You can do a little gospel, you can do blues, you can do jazz, and it's like all of Black American music comes out when you perform.
Well, that's the whole nucleus of it. I mean, from gospel, pop, to blues. Of course, my second love, I love to shout the blues. I'm a blues shouter. Thanks to my dad. My dad was a great blues singer. So I've always, see, the thing about, it's really true, you don't know about love until you learn the meaning of the blues, because that's what neutralizes your soul to give you the validity to be able to shout the blues. It's a different than belting, shouting, and singing the blues. I like to do them all three. Shouting the blues means rearing back and it comes from the, as Dizzy would say, from the bottom of your butthole through your diaphragm, through your voice. You know.
Who were some of the great blues singers that you admired?
Well, Joe Turner, Joe Williams, Louis Jordan. Oh, the list goes on and on. Jimmy Witherspoon, Eddie Cleanhead Vincent. The list goes on and on. Yeah.
What is it about the blues now? Because I noticed, and I was raised, my grandfather raised me on the blues by way of jazz. you can't have jazz without the blues.
Well, Charlie Parker was a perfect example of that. I mean, he played the blues, you know, when he did that great renowned blues, da-da-da-da-da, Parker's Blues. That epitomizes the whole echelon, what the blues is all about. And then there was lyrics that was written for his solo, which I think were fantastic. I believe the vocalist, Eddie Jefferson. Oh, man. I did get a chance to meet him in Chicago and heard him perform. He was the best. Yeah.
Eddie was shot and killed at Baker's Keyboard Lounge
in Detroit, Michigan. I wasn't there that night, but I heard about it the night it happened. I got a call not long after it happened. And, you know, it really hurt the business for a while at Baker's in Detroit. Of course, you know, a lot of people don't know Baker's is the most consistent jazz club in the world. It never closed.
It's the oldest jazz club
since 1930. And some of your best of the best have played there, from Nat Cole to Art Tatum to George Shearing. Every name imaginable in jazz at that time played at Baker's.
And if memory serves me correct, Art Tatum bought the Steinway in that club, right?
Well, he picked the Steinway, but that piano had been gone. That piano was, I think now is in a museum somewhere, you know. But I never actually played on the piano that he picked at that time. They changed piano through the years. But that is true, though.
What are some of your fondest memories of Art Tatum as far as listening and the concept of the music that he brought to the piano?
Well, when I first heard him play, I thought it was two pianos or three piano players. I was just overwhelmed, and I don't think there's going to ever be anyone yet that can be able to match up to his skills. He was actually the oh my Lord, when I talk about him, I get goosebumps. I mean, he played as modern, as hip as anybody today. No one on any kind of level has been able to match up to Art Tatum, as far as my humble opinion. And a number of other guys feel the same as I do. Plus, actually, his birthday was yesterday, the 13th. He would have been now, I think, 120-something years old. I think some.
Yeah, 123, something like that.
Is that right? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
talking about your birthday falls on Thelonious Monk. Now, when you came to Harry Sweets Edison,
Junior Mance, Charles Brown. The list kind of goes
drifting.
That's right. Yeah. And when I met Monk, I met Monk the very first time I came to New York, my very first visit. Barry Harris had told me, he said, whenever you come to New York, I have a surprise for you. But he didn't tell me what the surprise was. And I came to New York the first time in 1979. So I drove to New York from Detroit. I called Barry. I met up with Barry. He took me over to the Baroness. Nika was still living, the Baroness. So we arrived. I had no idea I was going to meet Monk. So when we arrived at his house, he said, Monk, I want you to hear this young kid play the piano. I'm like, I couldn't catch my breath. I was flabbergasted. And we sat down and we played all day. And Monk sat, and I wish they had, video cameras and stuff back then, and all that could have been taped, But it was really great. I was very honored to be in his presence. And he was, of course, he was one of the biggest and most influential songwriter of the 20th century.
He's up there with Duke Ellington.
Yes, absolutely. No, yeah. You got to really know Monk's music. His music is not easy to play. I have a challenge when I play it. I love playing it. I don't play enough of it as I should, but when I'm playing Monk, I did a couple of tributes to Monk, and it was really a task, but I loved it,
Let's go back to Charles Brown. Charles Brown and Louis Jordan really were the architects of what we call rhythm and blues.
That's right.
And Charles was so unique because he was a soulful version of what Nat Cole was doing.
Absolutely. There was so much similarity. And, just like when you think about Merry Christmas, Baby, that's the best version ever. Speaking of him, Peter Washington, the bass player, told me once he was on the bus in San Francisco, and Charles Brown got on the bus. He said he recognized him. And while he said, "Aren't you Charles Brown?" He said, "Yes, I am." Because, Peter just loved Charles Brown. He said they got acquainted on the bus and became friendly and kept in touch. Isn't that something? I love Charles Brown. Plus, he could really play the piano. He wasn't a technical wizard, but he was so soulful and just, very engaging with his way of playing. And, you could hear his personality through his playing, I've always loved him. My dad played a lot of his records when I was growing up. It's not the pale moon that excites me, the thrill that delights me. Oh, baby, it's just the nearness of you. It is in your sweet conversation that brings us sensation. Oh no, it's just the nearness of you. When you're in my arms, I feel you so close to me. All my wildest dreams, they all come true. Need no someone, you only grant me the right to ever hold you so tight. And you feel in the night, it's just a nearness of
close this interview by asking you two questions about technique and style. You know, we have masters. We have guys like Nat Cole, and we have guys like Thelonious Monk, and even Duke Ellington. How do you develop a style where people can say, that's Johnny O'Neill?
Well, you take all your influences and you compile them all into your, it's all about interpretations. You really can't actually play like someone else, but you can conceptually think like them. So that's what I've done. I think like a lot of those guys. So I try to incorporate all those styles into my own way of my own interpretation of them, than trying to play like them. Of course, you're going to be so over-influenced by what you hear, you want to emulate it, but that's how you develop your own style. You have to copy. No one is totally original. When you hear, just like when you hear players sit down and play, they're not always sometimes just totally original. They might have gotten that from one of their influences, the idea, the concept, you know. So that's what I'm about. I don't like to be generalized and say I don't play like Art Tatum or Oscar Peterson. You know, I think like them conceptually. It's my own interpretation, along with my own, you know, concept.
Do you think a lot of the swing and the soul has kind of drifted from jazz music now?
Not far as I'm concerned, because that's what I'm about. That's why I'm here, to keep this tradition alive of what the great masters have paved the way and provided for me to do. And what's been more gratifying for me, I come along, I was able to play with a lot of the masters. So when a lot of these young kids play with me, they playing with all my experience. They playing with Blakey's, they playing with Dizzy's, they playing with all my experience. And the future belongs to the youth. And I was just telling some people not long ago now, I'm 64 years old. Now when I was with Blakey, he was 64. Now I'm his age. Just keep living. You know what I mean? I'm glad that I'm still here. And being in New York, I never imagined that I would be in New York. And how I actually came back to New York, my son, you know, after my mother took sick in Detroit, I wound up putting her in a nursing home. So my son said, Dad, why don't you go back to New York? I said, New York is for young people. He said, no, Dad, I think you would make a difference because I already had a name here, you know, previous to playing with a lot of the great masters here. So I came back to New York, and it has been the most rewarding, best move I could ever make at my age now. I've been here 10 plus years now.
You know, Johnny.
I'm 50s. Now I'm in my 60s now, so it's great.
You know, Johnny, you have really, again, with the tradition of great jazz pianists that came out of Detroit. I mean, you've got Kirk Lightsey, yourself.
My very dear friend. You know, we have an album that we did. We did a dueling piano years ago for some label in Detroit. We both never heard it, believe it or not. Yeah, Kirk Lightsey, Tommy Flanagan, oh, the list goes on and on. I mean, Hank Jones, they were all my very dear friends, yes. I used to be honored. Hank is the one made me discover that I guess I am a singer because he used to invite me up to sing with him. And that was really an honor to sing with Hank. I remember one time he called me up and we were doing Waltz for Debbie. And he played such an intro, was so fantastic. I couldn't even come in. I just went blank on the lyrics just because of his orchestral, simple 4-bar intro. He was the best accompanist in the world.
And Hank played like it wasn't work.
Oh yeah. Well, of course, that was a big family. There was like 12 of them, and they all were multi-gifted musically. But as I understand, Hank's sister is the one that taught him how to play. Yeah. I heard she was a fantastic pianist, but she never wanted to really be into, she was in the church, so she didn't want to come out and play jazz. But I heard she was a great piano player, and that's where Hank got his stuff from his sister. Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. Reporting live here at Tavern on Jane here in New York City. I'd like to personally thank and congratulate and wish Johnny O'Neill a fantastic birthday. Please, peoples, like, share, and subscribe to my videos here on YouTube and Vimeo, as well as visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.